Israel's wars on terror and Gaza did not begin in the 20th or 21st centuries. The root causes of Israel's troubles in Gaza could be traced back to the days of Samson and the Philistines. But for the sake of the Gaza saga video clips, our evaluation will begin with the creation of the State of Israel in 1948, hence the title, Israel's Wars on Terror and Gaza. On May 14, 1948, Israel was officially declared a state, marking the first independent Jewish homeland in over 2,000 years. Just one day later, Israel was attacked by the armies of 5 Arab countries: Jordan, Iraq, Syria, Egypt, and Lebanon. At the end of this conflict, known as the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, or Israel's War of Independence, or the Nakba, the catastrophe, by the Arabs of Mandatory Palestine, Egypt was given the control of the Gaza Strip. This 140 square mile stretch of land, located along the Mediterranean coast between Egypt and Israel, has endured decades of protest, military operations, and violence since those early days. The Gaza-Israel conflict is a central part of the localized Israeli-Palestinian conflict, but is also part of the regional power struggle, which includes Egypt, Iran, Turkey, and Qatar, each supporting different sides of the conflict. At the conclusion of the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, Egypt was in control of Gaza and the surrounding area, that came to be called the Gaza Strip. Gaza's growing population was augmented by an influx of refugees, fleeing nearby cities, towns, and villages that had been captured by Israel. From 1948 until 1959, Gaza was nominally under the jurisdiction of the All-Palestine government, an entity established by the Arab League during the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, purportedly as the government for a liberated Palestine. However, this government was ineffective, with little or no influence over events in Gaza, and was dissolved by Cairo in 1959. Egyptian occupation of the Gaza Strip was broken for 4 months during the 1956 Suez crisis. It is the 1956 Suez War which laid the cornerstone of the future crises which were to erupt in Gaza in the forthcoming decades, right up to Operation Guardian of the Walls in May 2021. On the 26th of July 1956, President Nasser of Egypt nationalized the Suez Canal Company, which prior to that was owned primarily by the British and French shareholders. The Suez crisis was provoked by an American and British decision not to finance Egypt's construction of the Aswan High Dam as they had promised, in response to Egypt's growing ties with the communist Czechoslovakia and the Soviet Union. President Nasser reacted to the American-British decision by declaring martial law in the canal zone and seizing control of the Suez Canal Company, predicting that the tolls collected from ships passing through the canal would pay for the dam's construction within 5 years. Britain and France feared that Nasser might close the canal and cut off shipments of petroleum flowing from the Persian Gulf to Western Europe. When diplomatic efforts to settle the crisis failed, Britain and France secretly prepared military action to regain control of the canal and, if possible, to depose Nasser. They found a ready ally in Israel, whose hostility towards Egypt had been exacerbated by Nasser's blockage of the Straits of Tiran at the mouth of the Gulf of Aqaba, and the numerous raids by the Egyptian-supported commandos into Israel during 1955 and 1956. On October 29, 1956, 10 Israeli brigades invaded Egypt and advanced towards the canal, routing Egyptian forces. Operation Kadesh, as it was called, received its name from the ancient Kadesh, located in the northern Sinai and mentioned several times in the Hebrew Pentateuch. Israeli military planning for this operation in the Sinai hinged on 4 main military objectives: to capture Sharm el-Sheikh, Arish, Abu Wela, which is Abu Agela, and the Gaza Strip. The Egyptian blockade of the Tiran Straits was based at Sharm el-Sheikh, and by capturing the town, Israel would have access to the Red Sea for the first time since 1953, which would allow it to restore the trade benefits of a secure passage to the Indian Ocean. The IDF Chief of Staff at the time, General Moshe Dayan, first planned to block the vital Mitla Pass. Dayan planned for the Battalion 890 of the Paratrooper Brigade, under the command of Lieutenant Colonel Rafael Eitan, a veteran of the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, and future head of the IDF, to drop at Parker's Memorial near one of the defiles of the pass, Jebel Eitan. The rest of the brigade, under the command of Colonel Ariel Sharon, would then advance to meet with the battalion and consolidate their holdings. On the 29th of October, the invasion began when an Israeli paratrooper battalion was airdropped into the Sinai Peninsula, east of the Suez Canal near the Mitla Pass. In conjunction with the paratrooper drop, 4 Israeli P-55 Mustangs, using their wings and propellers, cut all overhead telephone lines in the Sinai, severely disrupting Egyptian command and control. However, due to a navigation error, the Israeli DC-3 transports landed Eitan's 400 paratroopers 3 miles away from Parker's Memorial, the intended target. Eitan marched his men towards Jebel Eitan, where they dug in while receiving supplies of weapons dropped by the French aircraft. At the same time, Colonel Sharon's 202nd Brigade raced out towards the Mitla Pass. A major problem for Sharon was vehicle breakdown. Dayan's efforts to maintain strategic surprise bore fruit when Egyptian commander, Field Marshal Abdel Hakim Amir, at first treated the reports of an Israeli incursion into the Sinai as a large raid instead of an invasion, and as such Amir did not order a general alert. By the time that Amir realized his mistake, the Israelis had made significant advances into the Sinai. Britain and France, following their plan, demanded that Israeli and Egyptian troops withdraw from the canal, and they announced that they would intervene to enforce a ceasefire ordered by the United Nations. On November 5th and 6th, British and French forces landed at Port Said and Port Fouad and began occupying the canal zone. This move was soon met by growing opposition at home and by US-sponsored resolutions in the UN, made in part to counter Soviet threats of intervention, which quickly put a stop to Anglo-French action. On December the 22nd, the United Nations evacuated British and French troops, and Israeli forces withdrew in March 1957. President Nasser emerged from the Suez crisis a victor and a hero for the cause of Arab and Egyptian nationalism. Israel did not win freedom to use the canal, but it did regain shipping rights in the Straits of Tiran. Britain and France, less fortunate, lost most of their influence in the Middle East because of this episode. The casualties in the war were as follows: Israel, 172 killed, 817 wounded, and 1 was captured. Egypt, between 1,650 and 3,000 killed, 4,900 wounded, 5,000 to 30,000 captured. The United Kingdom, 16 killed and 96 wounded, and France had 10 killed and 33 wounded. Following the Suez crisis in 1956, Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser agreed to allow the United Nations Emergency Force to establish itself in the Sinai Peninsula and Gaza Strip, precipitating the expulsion of all guerrilla or Fedayeen forces there, including Yasser Arafat, who in the ensuing years would become a central figure in the unfolding Gaza saga. In 1957, Arafat applied for a visa to Kuwait, at the time a British protectorate, which was approved based on his work in civil engineering. There he encountered 2 Palestinian friends, Salah Khalef Abu Iyad and Khalil al-Wazir Abu Jihad, both official members of the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood. Arafat had met Abu Iyad while attending Cairo University and Abu Jihad in Gaza. Both would later become Arafat's top aides. In the latter part of the 1950s, he co-founded Fatah, a paramilitary organization seeking the removal of Israel and its replacement with a Palestinian state. Fatah operated within several Arab countries, from where it launched attacks on Israeli targets. In the latter part of the 1960s, Arafat's profile grew. In 1967, he joined the PLO. However, it was not until the Six-Day War in June 1967 that the face of the Middle East in general, and Gaza in particular, was changed forever. But it would take a political decision of seismic proportions to change the thorn in the side of Israel into a sharpened and painful blade. That decision was going to be taken by Ariel Sharon in 2005.